Hi guys, I didn't get a chance to make a video for y'all today because I was diagnosed with the flu. And let's just say when you have the flu, let's just say it is rough. And I got diagnosed, had to leave work because yesterday when I was at work yesterday, I threw up 5,000 times. I was having to would take one call and then throw up. And so I went to the doctor, and there's more about that. I'm not going to another video about that, but I've been using this toothpaste. It is $24, but it is really good. I have a lot of work to do, but I just love this toothpaste so far. My mom had to come home, and I was like, I do not feel good. And I was in my 1950s outfit, and I threw up all over it. And if you've ever worn a vintage bra, or if you've ever done period clothing, it is very hard to get out of. So we're gonna get my makeup on because I have to go to work in a little bit, and I slept after I got back from the doctor and before I went to the doctor, I slept the whole day. So pretty much, yeah. So I'm using my Ilia tinted, and you have to shake it every time you do it vigorously because it will, but it's a skin tint and it has 45 sunscreen, and it's a non-toxic makeup brand, so today we're gonna do that. Now, I don't usually wear makeup when I'm going to work, but because I look like death warmed over today, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna start buying Tips & Co makeup when I get everything paid off and down. So now that I've done the foundation part of it, I am going to do my red lip liner. Now, I bought this lip liner from Drug Emporium when I was back in my hometown. And I want to welcome my new subscribers to the Jameson family. So I will but yeah, today has been a very eventful day. At first, my mom thought I was having like allergic reaction, and this is from Doll Cosmetics, and it is the Elizabeth shade. And I'm gonna fix that, I know. Makeup is a work in progress. While we're fixing my lip liner, I'm going to tell y'all a story time. And it's a work in progress. Trust the progress. So, we're going to use the Ilia eyeshadow, and I'm going to shake it up a bit. Yeah, so Friday, I called, it was 1 o'clock in the morning when I called in. And I left a message for my supervisor, and I told him, hey, I'll work Sunday, but I said I really cannot come in today. Because all of a sudden, it was like, I come in, or I go to work, and the day I'm feeling good, I make it on time, I don't miss anything, and all of a sudden, after I had lunch, I started feeling real ill. And I'm like, okay, I feel ill. And I'm doing kind of a 1950s modern makeup, so I'm doing both. If you're wondering what I'm trying to accomplish here, this is what I'm doing. So, I used to watch my big sister put on makeup every day when I lived with her. And she would always put on her makeup, and she would always let me play with it. And when I got older, me and my sister got to the point where I was getting too old for certain things, and I wanted my independence, and I wanted freedom, and I didn't want to follow the rules. And I was going through my rebellious teen phase. And one day, I'm gonna get mascara, give me 1 second. One day I decide me and James are going to skip school. We're gonna go get coffee, we're gonna go do things, and I wasn't really into school. I liked school, don't get me wrong, I had a lot of friends, but this is when my sister let me go to private school for 2 semesters. So, and people had asked, the school I did go to offered homeschool, so it was still through the school, and each state is different. And because my sister would be traveling a lot, or my brother-in-law would be traveling a lot, it was just easier for me to be homeschooled. And my sister had a friend who was a certified teacher. She had multiple licensing because her husband, left with the military a lot, but she pretty much stayed throughout my whole homeschool. And so I did go to public school, but I only did one semester. So one semester at public school, and that was pretty much it. So meanwhile, when I was in school, my sister dropped me off that morning because I hadn't got my license yet. I was gonna take the test that following day, and I passed. But we were going, so she would drop me off at school, she would get me Starbucks, and I would go to school. Well, unbeknownst to her, James would come and pick me up. Well, they called my other sister, trying to get a hold of my sister. And they said, hey, they knew I had stomach issues, they knew I had IBS, so I didn't try to miss any time if I could help it, and we would just, from there. So, that day, me and James are, going around town, and we decide to go to Walmart. Big mistake. Well, unbeknownst to me, one of my sister's friends actually saw us, and she called her up, and she's like, hey, is Topanga in school today? And she said, yeah, she should be. And she goes, well, I want to show you something. And my sister goes, okay. And she goes, well, you need to be aware she's not in school. And she was like, what are you talking about? So she sends her a picture. Her friend Sarah sends her a picture. And she says, hey, I'm at Walmart. I was getting something from Walmart. And she said I had to pick up something for a party or whatever. And she said, your sister is like right in front of me. And I waved to her, not knowing she was on the phone with my sister. And so 20 minutes later, the school finally gets through. And just to let y'all know, my sister had two sons. I was the older than her sons, and they could not pronounce Topanga to save their life. And I had my name changed because of my adoption. But they would say some pretty weird things. And so that day, my sister gets a call, and the school tells her, hey, she hasn't been at school for the last 2 days. And my sister's like, no, I sent her to school. She is there. I dropped her off. I took her to the area to wait until school started, and she said she should be there. So they called my brother-in-law, and he worked a lot, so he didn't answer at first. And my brother-in-law goes in and he's like, so they call my biological mom, and she's older and she's crazy. And she goes, so my sister calls my cell phone and I don't answer. Like, I don't answer. I don't pick up. And she actually ended up calling one of my friends that day who actually was home with the flu, ironically. And she had told her, hey, yeah, she's with James. They're going to get a coffee and they're going to have lunch. And my sister goes, do you know where they're going to have lunch? And my friend goes, yeah, they're going to it wasn't Chipotle. What was it? It was kind of like Chipotle. Was it Chipotle? No, it was In-N-Out. Sorry. In-N-Out. So we go to In-N-Out. We get there. We're eating in the restaurant. And 20 minutes later, my sister shows up. And she's very disappointed. She's upset. She did not know that me and James were dating. I had talked about James nonstop. And she was like, hi, my name's, told her name. And she had informed my brother-in-law that she had found me, and she's like, hey. And I was like, you have no business telling my brother-in-law what I do during a day. And she's like, well, he does care about you. He will always care about you. You're family to him. And so she goes and tells him, and she's like, why aren't you in school? And I was like, hey, I got all my work done, so there was really no point. And I was already graduating early, so I was like, there was really no point. And she's like, okay. And so I said, after this, we're gonna go to the mall. And she kind of got very upset and said, come with me for a minute. She whooped my butt. Okay, she's a little bit taller than me. And at that point in time, I was my natural hair color red. So I was in my natural hair color of red or not red, blonde. And I had like red, at the bottom it was red, and at the top and throughout the hair it was blonde. So fast forward, my sister passes away, and at 30 I end up my sister had already passed away in 2009. So fast forward, I am 30 years old and I start working my first job while I am going to college. And that job was Walmart. I loved the job. I didn't like certain people I worked with, but who ever does? You're not always going to like people around you. So one day, my big sister comes in and she's like, I have to see this for myself. She knows I work self-checkout. She comes to the self-checkout, and this is like a neighborhood Walmart, so it wasn't a superstore, and it was pretty, because my nephews came in first and they bought beer, and it's embarrassing when your nephews buy beer, and I was the only one in self-checkout, so I had to do their IDs, and so I scan their IDs, I get it done, and I'm just, and I go on to the next. So that day, the next day I work, and I'm working an 8-hour shift, and she comes up and she has her guacamole, and she's a vegetarian, and she's blonde. And at first I didn't recognize her because it had been a while since we had spoken. And she looks at me, dead in my eye, and goes, do you like your job? why won't you just come home and let us handle this as a family? And I told her no. I told her I needed to stand on my own 2 feet and I needed to be more self-sufficient, which she couldn't argue with that. She didn't like the way I went about it. So she leaves, and I said, and I would always have to assign registers to everybody, so there was only a set few registers that they would have open if one of us was working, and not all the registers would be open, if that makes sense. So I told her, hey, the register you're trying to go to is closed. We can't open it up. You need to go to the one over. And she goes, fine. But she goes, don't tell me what to do. I was like, ma'am, I'm not telling you what to do. And I just acted like I didn't know her. There was nothing I could do because you're really not supposed to wait on your family. But I was the only one there. My supervisor was watching me. So the next day, they pull me in. The supervisor does. And she goes, well, I got a complaint. And she says my sister's name. And I'm like, oh, great. And she said that you were bossy. She said, I watched the video. I talked to other people. You weren't bossy, but I am giving you a warning. And I said, that's fine. Whatever. We can deal with warning, whatever. So then 2 days later, my mom strolls up in her walker. And she's like, hey, if you need money, I can give it to you. And I'm like, no, I don't want anything from you. And at this time, I'm at the door. I'm like greeting people. And she said, I would love to do a project with you. And I'm like, okay, I work 2 jobs, so yeah, when I have time, and they're in the industry. I don't know what industry, but they're in the industry.